In 1996, a studio poured over $70 million into a sci-fi action movie starring one of the biggest names in Hollywood. It opened on 2,000 screens and vanished by the next weekend. Not just flopped, erased, like it never existed. Here's the real mystery. Some of these films had A-list stars, massive budgets, and marketing blitzes that blanketed television and malls. Yet today, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone under 35 who's even heard of them. One of them triggered a studio restructuring so severe it changed how mid-budget films got greenlit for a decade. Another featured a performance so bizarre it derailed a rising star's entire career, yet somehow never became a meme. How do movies this expensive, this aggressively promoted, disappear so completely? And why does Hollywood keep making the same mistakes? By the end of this, you'll understand the 3 fatal flaws that doomed these forgotten disasters, and how one of them secretly paved the way for the cinematic universes we know today. This is Cinema Bomb Squad, Cutthroat Island, 1995. Imagine trying to sell Pirates to audiences in 1995. Not the swashbuckling Johnny Depp kind. This was years before that. Back then, Pirates were dusty relics of Saturday matinees, not global blockbusters. But Gina Davis and her then-husband, director Rennie Harlin, believed they could revive the genre with gritty realism, practical stunts, and a female-led adventure that flipped the script. The promise? A feminist Raiders of the Lost Ark on the high seas. The bet was enormous, a $98 million budget. Some estimates stretch to $115 million, making it the most expensive film ever made by a woman director at the time. They filmed on location across Europe, built full-scale ships, and staged an underwater cave explosion that required weeks of diving rehearsals. The marketing leaned hard into spectacle, with trailers shouting, "The greatest treasure hunt ever." But audiences weren't buying. The crash was brutal. It opened to just $6 million domestically, less than Mortal Kombat, which had debuted months earlier. Critics called it a waterlogged mess, and audiences complained the tone swung wildly between cartoonish and grim. By week 2, it was pulled from half its screens. The receipts? One theater manager reportedly said, "We had more employees in the auditorium than paying customers." This flop proves that genre fatigue isn't about the concept, it's about timing and tone. Pirates weren't dead, they just needed charm, not cannonballs. And that was just the warm-up, because the next film didn't just misread the audience, it insulted them. The Adventures of Pluto Nash, 2002. Wait, 2002? Yes, but its DNA is pure late 90s hubris, and it deserves a seat at this table of forgotten shame. Eddie Murphy, fresh off Dr. Dolittle and The Nutty Professor, was at the peak of his box office reign. So why not launch him into space? The promise was simple. Star Wars meets Beverly Hills Cop, with Murphy as a smooth-talking ex-con running a lunar nightclub. The bet? A reported $100 million budget in an era when space comedies were already on life support after Galaxy Quest underperformed. Warner Brothers doubled down, banking on Murphy's star power to override genre fatigue. They even shot reshoots to add more jokes, despite early test screenings showing audiences found the whole premise baffling. The crash was historic. It grossed just $7 million worldwide, making it one of the biggest financial losses in studio history, adjusted for inflation. Critics savaged it, calling it a black hole of charisma, and audiences stayed away in droves. The receipts include a now infamous quote from a studio exec, "We didn't lose money, we vaporized it." This flop proves that no star, no matter how bankable, can carry a movie with no clear identity. And that's nothing compared to the next one, a film so overconfident in its own coolness it forgot to include a story. Ballistic, X vs. Severe, 2002. Again, technically 2002, but this was developed and greenlit in the late 90s during the action thriller arms race. Antonio Banderas and Lucy Liu, fresh off Desperado, and Charlie's Angels were cast as rival assassins, forced to team up. The promise? Mr. and Mrs. Smith before Mr. and Mrs. Smith existed, except with more bullets, less chemistry, and zero emotional stakes. The bet was a $70 million budget, massive for a mid-tier action flick, all riding on the belief that stylish gunplay plus beautiful people, just automatic hit. The marketing screamed, "The most dangerous game begins." But the trailers showed so little plot, audiences couldn't tell who was good or why anyone cared. The crash was immediate. It opened to $6.7 million, and critics universally panned it. Roger Ebert famously gave it 0 stars, writing, "I have no idea what happened in this movie." But the real receipt? It holds the dubious honor of being the first film in Rotten Tomatoes history to score a flat 0% with over 100 reviews. This flop proves that action without character is just noise. But nothing compares to what happened next, a movie that wasn't just forgotten. It was actively buried. Battlefield Earth, 2000. Ah, yes, the elephant in the room, or rather, the 8-foot-tall alien with dreadlocks. Based on L. Ron Hubbard's 1982 sci-fi novel and produced by John Travolta, a devoted Scientologist, Battlefield Earth promised an epic human rebellion against alien overlords. The bet? A $73 million budget, financed largely by independent investors, with Travolta handpicking nearly every creative decision. The crash wasn't just financial, it was cultural. Critics tore it apart, audiences laughed it out of theaters, and the film became a punchline before its second weekend. But here's the twist. It wasn't just bad. It was aggressively, stubbornly weird. The production design used Dutch angles in nearly every shot. Actors delivered lines like they were reading grocery lists, and the alien villains looked like rejected hair metal band members. The receipts? The film made $29 million worldwide, less than its marketing spend. It won 8 Golden Raspberry Awards, including Worst Picture of the Decade. Studios quietly stopped returning Travolta's calls for years. This flop proves that passion without perspective is a recipe for disaster. And we're just getting started. Because the next film wasn't a sci-fi misfire or action blunder, it was a comedy that forgot to be funny. Gigli, 2003. Another early 2000s casualty, but born from a late 90s script and mindset. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, Hollywood's golden couple, starred in this crime comedy about 2 hitmen falling in love. The promise? Bonnie and Clyde meets. When Harry Met Sally. The bet? Studio confidence so high, they let the couple rewrite the script on set and delay release dates to accommodate their schedule. The crash was seismic. It opened to $3.7 million, a record low for a wide release film with 2 A-list leads. Critics called it painfully unfunny, and audiences felt tricked by a trailer that promised romance but delivered cringe. The receipts include a legendary quote from a test screening, "I'd rather watch paint dry than sit through this again." This flop proves that celebrity chemistry doesn't translate to cinematic chemistry. But same year, different disaster. And this one involved dinosaurs, talking apes, and a director who thought more was always better. Dungeons & Dragons, 2000. Long before the 2023 reboot charmed audiences, there was this $36 million train wreck. Based on the iconic tabletop game, it promised magic, monsters, and medieval adventure. The bet? Casting young unknowns alongside seasoned actors, like Jeremy Irons, building elaborate practical sets in Prague, and banking on fantasy fans' loyalty. The crash came fast. It opened to just $2 million in the U.S. Critics mocked its cheap-looking effects and convoluted plot, and fans of the game felt betrayed by how little it understood the source material. The receipts? The film made more money in European markets than domestically, but even there, it was seen as a campy curiosity, not a hit. This flop proves that fan service without soul is just cosplay. And that's nothing compared to the next film, a romantic drama so tone-deaf it made audiences physically uncomfortable. The Bonfire of the Vanities, 1990. Yes, it's 1990, but its DNA is pure 90s studio arrogance, and it set the template for a decade of miscalculations. Based on Tom Wolfe's best-selling satire of New York's social elite, it starred Tom Hanks, Bruce Willis, and Melanie Griffith. The promise? A sharp, biting look at race, class, and media hysteria. The bet was massive. A $47 million budget in 1990 dollars, director Brian De Palma given near total control, and a marketing campaign that sold it as the next Do the Right Thing. But the crash was immediate. Test audiences hated the whitewashed adaptation. The book's black protagonist was turned into a white intern. Critics called it a satire without teeth, and it bombed hard. The receipts? It grossed $15 million. One insider said, "We thought we were making a classic. We made a cautionary tale." This flop proves that adapting satire requires guts, not just gloss. But wait, there's one more. And this is the one that almost killed a studio. The one teased in the opening. Waterworld, 1995. Ah, the $175 million behemoth. Kevin Costner, fresh off Dances with Wolves, wanted to build a post-apocalyptic epic where the polar ice caps had melted and dry land was myth. The promise? Mad Max on water with environmental urgency and mythic scope. The bet was insane. A budget that ballooned from $100 million to nearly $175 million after a cyclone destroyed sets, Costner's insistence on realism. They built a functional trimaran that cost $6 million alone, and a marketing campaign that cost another $70 million. Universal panicked, rushed the release, and hoped spectacle would save it. The crash was messy. It opened to $21 million, decent, but not enough. It grossed $264 million worldwide, which sounds healthy until you factor in marketing and the fact that studios only keep about half of international grosses. Net loss estimated at $60–80 million. But here's the twist they never saw coming. Waterworld eventually turned a profit through home video, TV rights, and theme park tie-ins. Universal still runs a Waterworld stunt show in its parks. It didn't kill the studio, but it came close. This flop proves that a movie can fail in theaters and still survive in the cultural bloodstream. If you want a part 2 covering the 2000s flops that vanished just as fast, comment 2000s. Now, let's talk patterns. Because after 8 films, a clear rulebook emerges. First, genre without identity is just noise. Cutthroat Island thought pirates was enough. Ballistic thought guns plus stars was a story. They weren't. Audiences don't buy concepts. They buy emotions wrapped in concepts. Second, star power has an expiration date. Murphy, Affleck, Travolta all thought their names alone could open doors. But if the movie feels confused or cynical, audiences smell it. Fast. Third, timing isn't everything. It's the only thing. Battlefield Earth arrived when sci-fi demanded nuance. The Matrix had just dropped. Dungeons and Dragons came before fantasy was mainstream again. Lord of the Rings was still 2 years away. You can have the best idea in the world. If you're 5 years too early or 1 year too late, you're dead. So why do these films disappear? Not because they're bad, but because they're forgettable. They don't earn a place in the conversation. No cult following, no ironic rewatch value, no so bad it's good redemption. They just evaporate. But that final open loop, the one about the film that secretly paved the way for cinematic universes? That's Waterworld. Its failure forced studios to rethink risk. Instead of betting everything on one original epic, they started building interconnected franchises where one flop wouldn't sink the ship. In a twisted way, Waterworld's failure made the MCU possible. Next, watch 10 forgotten 2000s flops that deserve a second chance. Because sometimes the bombs have hidden brilliance if you know where to look.